Monkey.
So I'm back out today and I'm in St Leonard's Church in Middleton, and I'm here purposely to revive the story of old KANKY, the infamous grave robber. Now there is a lot of folklore and mystery surrounding KANKY. Some people don't believe he even existed, and I often thought maybe it was something that was passed on from generation to generation and it's just got a bit out of hand. But what I want to do in the story is scratch the surface of KANKY, of the actual guy, William, and bring a bit of information to light about him to confirm that he did exist. And also, what I want to do, the aim of the video is to basically take you to the locations that KANKY operated. So this cemetery, for example, this is where KANKY would basically retrieve the bodies, the fresh corpses out of the ground. I'll take you down KANKY's Ginnel, which is sort of infamous, scary and spooky to even go down it. We're going to take a trip down KANKY's Ginnel and then we're going to head over to the River Irk, where KANKY would load his boat with the corpses and take them in the dead of night straight down the River Irk and into Manchester to meet his contact. So without further ado, this is the story of KANKY, the infamous grave robber.
Urban legends are stories. Stories that appear mysteriously over time and spread spontaneously in various forms, and they're usually untrue. They create a sense of fear of the unknown, and the tales that have been passed down from generation to generation. They're often over-exaggerated. And I wish that I could say that the story of old KANKY would slot perfectly into that category. But the story is true. Back in 1888, St Leonard's Church was the stomping ground of an infamous grave robber named William Lancashire. He was described as a very old man, shorter than 5 foot in height, with a hunchback. His house was directly behind the cemetery, the perfect lookout post, as he observed the weeping families burying their loved ones in the day. And as soon as the moon would grace the skies, it was time for old KANKY to go to work. Gather his tools of the trade and make his way up the infamous KANKY's Ginnel, a name given to the short alleyway that separated his house from the graveyard. Making his way up the cobbles, coughing and spluttering his way in the dead of night, guided only by the light of his lantern and the dim glow of his clay pipe. And once he'd reached the spot where the fresh body had been laid to rest earlier that day, KANKY would dig frantically, and pausing only to catch his breath, until he'd reached the coffin. And with a strike of his tool, he'd prise open the coffin, looking straight into the eyes of the unfortunate soul that lay lifeless before him. Then out came the rope, which he used as a noose around the neck of the corpse and pulled it to the surface. His work almost done, as he heaved the body over his shoulder and made his way back down KANKY's Ginnel. But his work wasn't over. Awaiting him on the River Irk was his docked boat, and as he clambered down the slope onto the river, he'd load his boat with the freshly retrieved corpse that he'd snatched from the graveyard and set sail down the River Irk and into Manchester to meet his eagerly awaited buyer, the surgeons of Manchester. And back in the 1800s, The autonomy profession was in its embryo stages, and in order to master your craft, you needed a fresh corpse to do so. And these were hard to come by. KANKY supplied a service to this industry, almost like the original version of the black market. The bodies were retrieved from the ground the day they were buried, and a decomposed corpse was useless to a doctor or a surgeon, and once the goods were exchanged, the dissection began. And the knowledge of the human body could be understood more. Service provided by yours truly. As old KANKY would collect his earnings and chuckle his way back onto his boat and sail out of Manchester and back to Middleton. A shameless and despicable act to the likes of you and me, but a satisfying reward for old KANKY. It was all done in a night's work.
Right, so I've brought you up here so we can get a bit of perspective and get in the mind of KANKY a little bit. Now, as you can see, it's just grave after grave after grave, and they're all overgrown. But if I just pan you over here, now this is the start of KANKY's ginnel, and KANKY's house was somewhere around here. It's believed to be somewhere around here, and the rumour has it that KANKY would be sitting, watching the funerals going on. You know, people would be burying loved ones, and out of the window of KANKY's house, he'd be seen smoking his clay pipe, staring and meticulously watching the actual grave and where the funeral was taking place. And, you know, these people were burying loved ones. You know, their hearts were broken. And in the mind of KANKY, all he was thinking about was money. And he'd be seen peering out of the window, and at the right time when the families had gone back home, mourning the loved ones, KANKY in the dead of night would come up these steps here, and he'd make his way up with his tools and his gang, and they would dig and they'd pull the fresh corpse out of the ground and retrieve the corpse all the way back down these steps, back down KANKY's ginnel, and make his way down to the River Irk where he'd meet his contacts. But it's just, you know, it's horrible to think that people's hearts were broken. If it wasn't bad enough, you know, losing a loved one and burying them, you know, imagine the horror when they found out that someone had actually robbed the body. It's a terrible, shameless act, and you know, KANKY mustn't have had any shame doing this. All he saw was the coin, and it's just terrible to think that as a funeral is going on, KANKY, in the back of his mind, he's just thinking of pound signs. But yeah, this is where KANKY would sort of peer out of the window and look towards the funerals that were going on at this church and cemetery. So this right here, this is the infamous KANKY's ginnel. And as you can see, the original cobbles are still down. The very cobbles that KANKY walked and I'm walking on, well over 100 years later. And the original wall is still here, that KANKY would have probably brushed past when he was making his way down here. And in one hand he would have had a shovel, and over his shoulder he'd have had a fresh corpse, and he would have been black, he would have been covered in mud. and he would have stunk as well. He would have really stunk. Now he knew when he got to this point, it was a matter of getting the body on the boat and into Manchester. And soon as he did that, he knew he was quids in. So each time he's walking closer and closer and closer, knowing he's got away with this wicked deed, and he would set sail down into the River Irk and meet his contact into Manchester. But that is the very, very ginnel that KANKY would have come down in the dead of night. Right, so this is the River Irk, and this is where KANKY would basically load his boat with his cargo, and he would make his way down this river and underneath that bridge straight into town in the dead of night. Now obviously you can see it's quite shallow here, and I would have imagined back when KANKY was operating around here it would have been a lot higher. But either way, it's kind of sinister to be loading a boat in the dead of night with a sort of, you know, a dead body and bringing it down here. And then he would set sail basically down the River Irk straight into Manchester to meet his contact.
So given to some, the story of old KANKY is nothing more than an exaggerated story, nothing more than a myth. Ghost story to warn off kids playing in the graveyard at night. But allow me to present some facts that prove that the legend of old KANKY was in fact real. Over the last few weeks, I've worked closely with a friend and researcher, Steve Brown, to which he enlightened me about old KANKY. KANKY's real name was William Lancashire, and the burial grounds of St Leonard's Church is now the resting place for many of the Lancashire family. William's mother was called Lucy Dean. She was the daughter of a weaver who went on to marry John Lancashire, the father of KANKY. They had 2 children together, one being William, who was born in 1811, and his younger brother John, who was born in 1817. KANKY's mother Lucy died on March the 16th, 1860, aged 74 years old, and with KANKY's father disappearing from the records, it sounds like KANKY only ever had his mum and his brother in his life. Now we don't know how long KANKY was running his macabre business for. It could have been something that he did behind closed doors, behind the back of his mother. Or did his mother's death trigger him to delve into a much more lucrative business once she died, with nobody to cast judgment on him? I suppose we'll never know. But one thing is for sure, KANKY died in 1882 at the age of 71 years old, and it was only after his death that KANKY's dark secret was revealed, and an article from the Middleton Guardian in 1882 reads as this: Sudden death of old KANKY. About 8:15 on Friday night, William Lancashire, better known as old KANKY, was discovered dead in his house near the cemetery wall behind Lodge Street. A neighbour happening to enter the house at the time stated she found the deceased lying on the coals in the kitchen. his right hand grasping the coal scuttle. The deceased has for several years suffered severely from bronchitis. He had evidently gone into the kitchen for the purpose of replenishing his fire when he was overcome with an attack of illness, in which he died. The deceased was about 70 years old. He was a man of eccentric habits. He was in stature a diminutive man, scarcely 4 feet in height. His back bent by the 70 years in which he carried. He seemed to have an aversion for soap and water, and to have extended this feeling to the household. Indeed, on several occasions, the sanitary authority have received complaints in this respect. He was quite harmless. He was very unoffensive, and often making him the butt of numerous jokes. It's reported that since he deceased, a considerable sum has been found, concealed in various parts of the house. It's believed that jewellery, money, and the belongings of the dead victims he snatched during the night were found upon inspection of his property. KANKY lived a double life, and he took his dirty secret to the grave. A man that by all accounts seemed harmless in the day, but by night he transformed into a despicable creature. It's no wonder that the ghost stories of old KANKY still reverberate around the area, as people claim to have experienced the presence of KANKY throughout the cemetery, and in particular the infamous ginnel, which he frequented regularly. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that we didn't experience something ourselves whilst filming the video. My dad was filming a segment for his own video on KANKY, and captures what can only be described as an old man breathing heavily, almost as if someone was out of breath. Here's the clip, and I'll let you decide.
You'd already have a buyer waiting for the corpse in Manchester, and this is the area he would have lived in. I mean, it's overgrown now. It's all sort of like industrial now, but that's looking up the ginnel. This is the area he would have lived in. I mean, it's overgrown now. It's all sort of like industrial now, but that's looking up the ginnel.
Now, I'm not saying that this is paranormal, but it's definitely something strange. And given all the sinister activity that KANKY took part in, it wouldn't surprise me if he still roams the graveyard at night, ghost-like, standing over the graves he so shamelessly dug up, sending a chill down the spine of the living. So next time that you visit St. Leonard's, spare a thought for the poor families of a bygone era who suffered having discovered the loved one had been taken away. And keep your eyes peeled, because you never know. KANKY could have his eyes on you.
Right, so there you have it. That was the story of old KANKY, the infamous grave robber from Middleton. It's been a video that I've been meaning to do for going on a year now, but I've just not dedicated the time to doing it. So I'm really glad that I got out today and filmed it, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. So I just want to thank everyone, honestly, for the continued support that you show me and the channel. It means the world to me, it really does. And knowing that you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, just, you know, it means everything, honestly. And if you are a new viewer, I always feel awkward saying this, but I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost a penny, but it just means that you'll see content like this, and it'll help the channel grow. So yeah, I'd really appreciate that. I've been out today with my dad, whose YouTube channel is Tales Beyond the Grave, and I've also been out today with Lee from A Grave Interest. So I'll leave the links to their channels down below too. Go and check them out, give them a sub, it'd be much appreciated. So until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care, everyone. Cheers.